Hello and welcome to the Top Order podcast. We've been teasing this one for a while and it's finally here. 2024 year in review for the Black Caps, as well as a look ahead to what's to come in 2025. We'll talk Champions Trophy, the bowling reboot, casual contracts, batting depth, and a whole lot more. All coming up right after the swish. I did it, Raj.
There it is. You did it. Well done. Well done.
A successful swish. Hopefully that obviously bodes well for a fun episode here. Did you know, actually, this is our 400th episode?
Really? No, I did not know that.
400 episodes. So congratulations to you. Congratulations to all of us. And thanks to the listeners, the viewers, the day oneers, to the new subscribers. Actually, when was the last time that you listened to that very first episode that we did?
Oh, no. I'd stay away from that episode. It's very, very cringeworthy. Hopefully it's not able to be found.
Okay, look, enough chit-chat from me because, as I said, a few people, funnily enough, or to my delight, really, have been saying, when's the episode coming? When's the New Zealand preview coming? So we've teased it for a while, and it's a shame kind of not to have all the guys on for 400, but you know that I can't think of a better subject for a milestone episode like this. So a deep dive on the Black Caps and New Zealand cricket. Here we go. We are going to start by looking at the year just gone. And Raj, I promise I will let you talk soon, but I'm sort of keen to get your general thoughts on 2024 and where the team's at right now. But I will run through the results from 2024 just to sort of provide a bit of background. So in 2024, the Black Caps went 11-9 in T20s, which was bookended by home series wins against Pakistan and Sri Lanka, as well as an 0-3 loss to Australia in a fairly disappointing T20 World Cup campaign. In Test matches, the Black Caps went 6-6. Historic series wins against South Africa at home, India away, alongside some not so wonderful performances at home against Australia, away in Sri Lanka, and then finally at home against New Zealand. As for the ODIs, the Black Caps played just 2 away games in Sri Lanka, lost both of those. I think there was a third game actually, and it was rained out from memory. All in all, I found 36 players that at least batted for New Zealand in 2024, included the likes of Tim Robinson, Mitch Hay, Nathan Smith, Zach Folkes, those kind of players making their debuts. And we ended the year with Mitchell Santner as the white ball captain and Tom Latham as the test captain. So, Raj, after all of that, I guess, what stands out to you about the 2024 season? Was it a good year for the Black Caps, a bad one, a memorable one? I mean, what do you make of 2024 and then we might get into sort of where we're at as a team right now?
Look, I think there's a lot of mixed results there. There's some absolutely historic stuff from a positive point of view, and there's some pretty poor stuff as well. Including the sort of the loss to Sri Lanka, which in itself is not, it's not horrible or shocking that we went to Sri Lanka and lost, but the way that we lost there, I think, we played well below par, and then England here, I think we didn't really put our best foot forward until really that sort of final game. Absolute mixed bag. I tend to focus more on the sort of red ball stuff, but we didn't play much one day cricket at all. I don't believe it was mainly 2020 stuff, and that's sort of the jewel of that crown was the 2020 World Cup, and we talked about it at the time. There was a lot of interesting sort of policies around when people turned up to that tournament. Unfortunately, we played our important games right at the start, and we didn't get into our stride until later on in that tournament. And it was not a good one for us, and one that won't be remembered fondly. I think as we go into this podcast, we'll be talking more about specific personnel, coaching even. It's just a time of transition. We've lost a lot of our sort of players who took us on that cycle to the World Test Championship, and we've got a lot of sort of new guns and people who I'm really excited to see how they sort of grow and blossom over the next couple of years. But yeah, I definitely, if I had to pick a word, I would say it feels like a transitionary kind of year for us.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, those stats, they bear out what I feel, which is basically we're a middling team right now. We 6-6 in the tests, 11-9 in the T20s, and it very much felt like that like you said, it was a mixed bag, but weirdly enough, sort of not the win. Like if particularly in the tests, not the wins that I thought we would get.
Mm.
I in a weird year like that I don't think we necessarily played that well. We had this massive, massive highlight of a 3-0, test win in India that I will remember for the rest of my life. That was such a huge high. But then you look at the rest of the year, and it was sort of filled with not huge. I mean, not there were a few moments of big disappointments for me, but I think a lot of it just felt like we just weren't quite there. A lot of missed opportunities. I suppose we've been spoiled a bit as Black Cap fans. Although whenever we talk to Baldy, it reminds me that it's being spoiled, you can just keep winning. Like it's all right to just keep winning. You don't have to just go through patches of losses and things. But I mean, the word to pick up on, really, I think that you said is transition, and I actually think that for some people the transition hasn't happened quickly enough. But then, you mentioned it there. You look at the bowling attack in the Test arena, particularly, and we've seen Bolt, de Gronholm, Wagner, Southee all disappear from that lineup. I mean, there's been so much cricket this past 12 months, but this time last year, Neil Wagner was still a black cap. Kyle Jamieson's been out for the majority of the year. 2024 saw, Matt Henry step up into the leader of that New Zealand attack. So there's been a lot of changes. And, I think that, if we want to look at how the team is going forward and where we are now, the weird thing is that if you'd asked me 18 months ago, kind of, I don't know, compare the batting and compare the bowling, at that time I thought we had quite a bit of batting depth. We had the likes of Phillips on the sidelines, Young on the sidelines, Ravindra only just sort of making his way into international cricket. And bowling, we had all those guys that were there. They'd been there for so long, and it felt like, maybe behind Kyle Jamieson, we were playing the likes of Blair Tickner, Scott Kugelheim, and it felt like they were sort of searching for a new batch of bowlers, and they didn't really know who to go to. Now, when I look at this, as I said, Matt Henry, he took 48 Test wickets this year at 18.58. We've blooded Will Young into the Test arena. He now has 10 under his belt, 36 wickets at 24, and looks at 23 like someone that can really usher in the new era for New Zealand. So I'm sort of feeling quite bullish about the bowling stocks from a New Zealand point of view, health aside. But, do you want to add anything on that?
Well, I mean, you're 100% right. This time last year, we had Southee, we had Wagner, we had Jamieson, who were, that's our sort of three-pronged seam attack. Whereas, as things have played out this year, there has been a lot of transition. The big T has come up again. But really, Matt Henry has emerged as very much our premier strike bowler. He has bowled incredibly well this year. Has had to do the rotation thing as well. There were, horses for courses pitches where he was, other members were picked ahead of him.
Those don't look so good now.
They don't look good as well, but they don't look good now. But his strike rate of under 34 at 18 that you said is just incredible. He's bowled really well. You add O'Rourke, you add Jamieson to that now. I think that we have a really strong three-pronged seam attack again. From a being Boyd point of view, I know we'll get to the batsman in a second, but I thought we were going to really struggle to sort of take 20 wickets. As a team that traditionally doesn't rely on spin, where was our pace wickets going to come from? And now I feel a lot more confident with what we've got there. I'm excited to see these guys go ahead and take on the world. Is there anything else you wanted to mention about those pace bowlers, or are we going to start talking about spin? Because I think that's where the discussion starts to get a bit deeper, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I will just say, look, Ben Sears, super excited for him coming into the mix. I think Nathan Smith has shown promise coming into the environment. We've got guys in the white ball who've been blooded, like Zach Folkes. We've seen Jacob Duffy sort of not quite get a test gig yet, but certainly show that he's up to it and he's actually, I think, showed he's up to it for a while now in white ball cricket. He's been that seems to sort of be the odd person out. He's actually been the odd person out in this Champions Trophy team again, which we might mention in a little while. But yeah, I think that depth is there. there's young guys like Matt Fisher on the scene as well. I think there is a lot of exciting talent. It's just going to be health for those seamers. I mean, Jameson's coming back from a stress fracture again. Sears just hasn't been able to stay fit for a year. He's been included in this Champions Trophy side. I'd love to see him get a full year because, the likes of, the three if we get the three that you named, you throw in Ben Sears into that attack, suddenly we've got two real serious pace bowlers that we haven't had in partnership like that for a long, long time. And, then you've got the craft of Matt Henry, the craft of Kyle Jameson. Yeah, we really, really hope that they can kind of pull that together. On the spin side, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, I mean, the issue has been there for a long time, right? Every year we talk about how do we get more New Zealanders into the, how do we develop our spinners? We've got Ajaz Patel, who's 36 now. There's actually no reason why he couldn't play a few more years, if he wants to. And Mitchell Santner has sort of moved into the number one spin spot, at least in New Zealand. And I think probably the difference why it's relevant now to be picking him, which we talked about a bit in the England series, is that you don't necessarily have that four-pronged pace attack like we did before. So there's more opportunity to say, okay, well, if we're deciding between Mitchell Santner and Nathan Smith or Mitchell Santner and Jacob Duffy, maybe it is more appealing to pick Mitchell Santner, who I think has improved a lot in the in the red ball, been able to spin the ball more, sort of think about his test bowling a bit more over the past sort of 12 months. Yeah, maybe that is a bit more of a conversation than it once was.
I guess the way I'm looking at it is we've been trying to have it both ways for a while now. I think we need to make some decisions around what our spin attack actually looks like. Mitchell Santner, as you mentioned there, I think he has to be one of the first people picked in a squad when he's available, especially in I'm talking mainly Test arena here. He's always going to be picked. He's the captain now, isn't he, of the white ball sides? But he needs to be one of the first red ball spinners picked. I think we have to give credit to Baldy. I think he's been saying that for a while, that he should be one of the first picked when it comes to red ball sides. But we're using our part-time spinners with the likes of Phillips and Ravindra. We need to actually use them to carry out an actual role in the game plan. It's not whether that's sort of like a short sort of golden arm, go break a partnership or hold up an end, or what does that actually look like? We can't just be using these two and chuck them the ball and go ahead, go and have a go, see what happens. Which I feel like that has happened at some stages. And you mentioned the Australian series. I looked back at the scorecards today. Glenn Phillips took that 5 I completely forgot about against the Aussies. It's an incredible achievement. Well done. But I think we need to make a decision about what we're going to do with our spin attack, and I think it is go with the likes of Mitchell Santner and use these other part timers like Phillips and Ravindra as a supplementary role to our attack when and if they are needed. At the moment, I just feel like there's a bit of a split, definitely in Glenn Phillips's mind. He is a batsman. He's picked to score runs. I know he's been doing a job for us this year. I think he's got 23 wickets at 36. That's good. Played a lot of games on the subcontinent, but I'd love to see him averaging 60 or 70 with the bat for a year. You know what I mean? Rather than taking some wickets with the ball. But yeah, I think that's more of a discussion how we use our spin attack. You mentioned there about layers and different looks. We've got the pace bowlers who bowl good hard lengths. We've got the out and out pacers with Lockie Ferguson coming back as well into that white ball squad that you mentioned, Sears, O'Rourke, and then now we need to decide what we're going to do with our spinners. I think that's sort of the last sort of thing to sort of solidify what our plan is there to take 20 wickets in a test match, because I'm not sure that we've got that, especially outside of the subcontinent. It seems like when we go to the subcontinent, we're going to pick 3 spinners. That's how we're going to take our wickets. But when we're outside of there, I think that we're a little bit unsure about what we do with our slower bowlers.
Yeah, and look, I mean, we've seen over the past 12 months, Ish Sodhi's form has really dipped. He's struggled for consistency, fallen out of favour, even in the white ball formats where he was pretty much a lock in our side, in all squads at least. for quite a long time. And I think the name that probably a lot of people were hoping would be further along in the development is Eddie Ashok. He's someone that even New Zealand cricket has earmarked for a long time. He's played for New Zealand in the T20 format. He just hasn't been able to stay fit. I think largely is the reason why his development hasn't sort of come along. I think probably in New Zealand cricket, in the selectors' minds, by 2025, maybe he was someone that they would have thought, okay, he might, now have had a couple of years of productive first class cricket under his belt and be in the mix for a a New Zealand spot. It just hasn't happened for him, and I think really, probably in general, when we sort of talk about 2025, that year of transition, I don't necessarily think it's over. I think it's sort of another, not necessarily a gap year, but a transition year. And for the spin side of things, Eddie Ashok is a name that I'll be looking for, and a name that I'll be looking to see, can he have a full year of first class cricket and really put his name in lights? Because I don't, he's had a few moments for Auckland, but he hasn't always been the first picked spinner in Auckland, and again, I think injuries have played a big part in that. But yeah, Santner can keep going for a while. Like I said, Ajaz could keep going for another year or two. But I think what your point that you're making is we need to think about spin playing a role in all conditions, and being able to have a spinner that's capable of doing that. And maybe for in New Zealand conditions, it is Mitchell Santner because he can bat, and Michael Bracewell. That is the mould that they've been looking for a while. But yeah, apart from Ashok, the young spinners might not be there. So yeah, I hope that's sort of starting to whir around in the selectors' heads and think, okay, what do we do now? Because we're going to have an opportunity when we go to Zimbabwe. I think there might be games in Sri Lanka. We've got the West Indies at home. Other opportunities where we can say, well, we want to be like England and Australia and stuff, where we just pick a spinner anyway and think about how we're going to build a side that can compete in all conditions.
Yeah, I mean, do you? I'll ask a question to you. A question without notice. Do you think that there is a time where we would just pick a spinner? It would have to be someone who's really pulling up trees all the way. Well, I mean, even I was watching the test today. I don't know if you've seen that. The season 3 of the tests come out, and even when Nathan Lyon got injured. Todd Murphy played one game and then he didn't play in that 4th test. So they didn't play a spinner in that 4th test either. So, yeah, maybe I don't want to be crude or rude about it, but is it a quality thing? Do we just not have that spinner at the moment that can, pull up trees from one end?
Well, I think that's what it has been for the past 10 years. Not necessarily that we haven't had anyone with any quality, more because, Ajaz has shown what he can do overseas. But I think it's more been around, and I still actually think this, you pick your 4 best bowlers, to win the game. You pick the bowlers who you think are going to win, get the 20 wickets. And for New Zealand, we've had such a great bowling, seam bowling depth that our best 4 bowlers were in New Zealand conditions were always seamers. It wasn't even close. And even if we're thinking about overseas, I remember there's times where you in particular have said, we're playing in Sri Lanka, but our 3 best bowlers are seamers. Just pick our 3, pick 3 seamers. Like there's no point in just picking bowlers because they belong in those conditions in the textbook. It's about picking your best bowlers, and I think that'll be the question for New Zealand. The sort of transition part of our seam attack means that now we can go, okay, like I said before, if we're thinking about a question between Santner and Duffy or Santner and Nathan Smith, maybe the the perceived equality of those kind of bowlers and what they can offer at this stage means you can pick a seamer and actually balance your attack a bit better. Whereas, if we do get to a time where Jameson, Sears, O'Rourke and Henry are all fit at home, I think they're all going to, those kind of bowlers are going to play. So, yes, and to answer your question, I've gone around and around in circles. Unless we have a real world-class spinner in our lineup, I do think that's always going to be the case for New Zealand. But it is important for us now with this World Test Championship being a fixture. Who knows what's going to happen with this two-test thing, two-tier test thing, if that ever eventuates. But, if we're going to be playing all around the world in all sorts of conditions and we want to try and repeat that World Test Championship success, then we are going to have to be able to win in lots of different environments. So it's something we do have to think about, given the age of some of our spinners that have performed admirably in recent times in those conditions. Should we move to the batting now? Because, as I said, 18 months ago, I was so convinced that we had all this batting depth, and now I feel much less sure of that, Raj.
Yeah, I mean, just off the top, Will O'Rourke's batted 18 times for 18 runs. That's a bit of a worry, but I did see he's actually had 12 not outs in those 18. So
he's looked solid.
He has looked solid. Maybe we don't need to measure our batting quality against the man who's batting down the bottom there. But I mentioned to you before, I asked you the question, before we came on air, how many of our batsmen do you think scored Test hundreds this calendar year or last calendar year? And the answer's 3. So it's only Kane Williamson, Rachin Ravindra, and the one for Blundell in the English series there at the end of the year. So that is quite a worry when we've got the likes of Latham, Mitchell, Phillips, Conway, all averaging 30 or under, which is a little bit of a concern. What do you make of that?
I don't disagree. I mean, it's a real worry. I look at those names on paper, and I think, gee, we're quite well stocked. We've now, Will Young's been putting his hand up in recent times, so we've now sort of still got that decision to be made, I guess, between, probably only one of Devon Conway and Will Young can play. They've both been picked in this Champions Trophy side, so I think we're going to have the same question in white ball as we probably will do when we next play Test cricket. But yeah, when you actually dive into the numbers, you see a bunch of middling scores and sometimes less than middling, below average scores. And I don't know. I mean, maybe we dive into some of them individually, because you and I both had really high hopes for Devon Conway. There was a time when the two of us were talking on this podcast, I think, of someone with the potential to become an all-time great for New Zealand. He was looking like someone who just didn't have form slumps. Then he punched his bat, broke his finger, and I don't really think he's found that form since. And I don't know where I'm at with him, because I still, in my head, think of him as this guy who, at his best, is absolutely world class and a player that can score those big hundreds that you're talking about in both red and white ball format. But he just looked lost over the past, particularly by the time we got to that England series, the way he was getting out, that sort of, I don't know, even just the look on his face. I don't know. Where do we go from here with Conway, Raj?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think a lot of it's going to have to do with what happens in February. I mean, a lot of this is going to have to do with a lot of what happens with our sort of coaching plans and what happens in February when Gary Stead's contract comes to an end, whether he picks up an option.
June or July,
June,
I think,
sorry.
Gary's contract. But that's... Yeah, the Champions Trophy is before that, but then there's not too much cricket for New Zealand after that.
Yeah. So after the sort of February cricket, we can kind of take stock and go, where do we want to go? What are our plans for the next sort of cycles, one day and red ball cycles? But I've said it before on the podcast. I know you probably disagree with me a little bit. I just think there's a lot of batsmen who are batting in the wrong spot. They're not batting in the spots where they batted to get themselves to the spot, to the New Zealand side, to the national side. Conway, I can just imagine, him coming in against a 20-over-old ball, not having to face Jasprit Bumrah with a brand new cherry. What does that look like? What does it look like with Devon Conway batting in the 60th over of a day? You know what I mean? I think that it's a very different to him facing the brand new ball in New Zealand conditions. Conway in particular, I don't think we were wrong. I think that he is a world-class talent. He proved us right straight away when he came and made his debut and scored the double century early on in England. So I don't think was it form is temporary, class is permanent. I don't think that he is a poor player. I think that he just needs to regain that form, and I don't know what it is. Maybe having a baby. That's what I think I scored a good 30 after I had a baby, after not being able to score runs. So maybe he'll start scoring runs. I don't know. But yeah, he is probably at the top of the list in terms of concern. But right next to him there are Tom Latham, Glenn Phillips, Daryl Mitchell as well, though Daryl Mitchell has scored some runs in the last sort of month, 6 weeks. What about our keeping stocks? Blundell, are you happy with the fact that he scored that 100? Does that give him a little bit more rope for you? Is it a career-saving 100?
I don't know about that really. I mean, I think for him, the fact that we're not going to see him again in the New Zealand shirt for a while anyway, because of he's not in the white ball setup at the moment, and that's all there is until we go to Zimbabwe in July. And as you said, the coaching question is up in the air at the moment. We don't know whether there's no news really whether Gary Stead is going to put his hat back in the ring for reappointment. He's been the coach now for 8 years, I think, maybe. Yeah, it's something like 7 or 8 years.
7 years, yeah.
It's been maybe even the longest stint for a New Zealand coach for quite some time, if not ever. He's had his successes, he's had some down times as well over the past few years. But I think that's probably a question for whoever comes next, because Blundell even has gone back to Super Smash now and has not been able, is not really getting runs. That 100 that he scored, yes, it's a test 100. Yes, it was some incredibly clean hitting when he got going. He looked much better when he was playing positive. We saw some of the notes that we're, so used to seeing from Tom Blundell when he is really going well, the foot movement, hitting to various parts of the ground. But there's going to be such a big gap between that 100 and the next game for him that, is he there? I don't know. It's a huge question. The main issue I have is that I don't know who else it is. Again, Mitch Hayes been earmarked, I think, to take that spot. He's been introduced into this white ball setup. He's had flashes. He's shown a few signs. I don't love everything I've seen in terms of probably more, he's a young guy. By no means am I writing him off. I think he's got huge potential there. You see that with the way his ball striking and when it has come off for him, what's looked good. But I don't know. It just reading the body language, I didn't feel like he came in and owned international cricket. Again, I don't know, Mitch Hay. Maybe that's just his personality. Maybe that's not something we're going to see from him ever, even if he becomes, a great for New Zealand. So, yeah, I don't know. There's Max Chew in the background who is having a really good domestic season. Has started to, I guess, increase his run scoring output over the past couple of years. So there are people around, but I think it is a huge question mark. When I write down my side for my test side for 2025 and beyond, it is a question mark at the wicket keeping spot, and it's something they're going to have to think about, even in white ball cricket as well. We look to this Champions Trophy side. Tom Latham's been picked in that squad to bat 5, 6 and keep. Whether he's quite he has done it various times. He's done a really good job for us in that role, but the way that white ball cricket is developing, you see the role that 5, 6, 7 play, and it doesn't feel like the role that Tom Latham is best suited to at the moment. It's normally someone who comes in and just accelerates from ball one. So whether he's the right person, we thought Conway might have been our T20 keeper for a little while. We've seen Tim Seifert used at various times in the T20 game, and now he seems to be someone who's a little bit on the outer because of contracting situations and his decision to, forego a domestic contract to then, go up and pick up gigs in various T20 leagues around the world. I mean, while we're on that, how do you think New Zealand is? I mean, we will get back to some of the batting stuff because there are a few other people I want to talk about. But How do you think New Zealand cricket has sort of managed the contracting side of things? Because we've got Kane Williamson and Conway on casual contracts, so that again complicates things in particular for Conway if he's not performing, sort of what the future might look like for him. And there's lots of other guys that, the likes of Neesham, Lockie Ferguson, uh, you know, Seifert, as I've just said, some of these are because they haven't been offered a contract, and sometimes it's because of the way New Zealand's sort of figured out their contracts. Yeah, how are you feeling about how all of that's kind of come together? Because Bolt, we saw Trent Bolt gave his contract up, and we almost never saw him again. And apart from a few white ball tournaments, now it does seem like things are changing, but it's still unclear, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think that it's probably been handled as well as it could have. It could have got really messy, and there could have been some really sort of broken relationships around how some of those players left the game and left New Zealand cricket and wanted to go and chase those 2020 contracts, those big money contracts. Finn Allen's another one that we didn't mention in that. Uh, I think it's been handled all right. I think that there's an understanding that these are the contracted players, and we've contracted them. But when it comes to a big tournament, a white ball tournament, we're going to pick the best people who we believe will help us win that particular tournament. In saying that, when we get to the Champions Trophy squad, I think that someone like Jacob Duffy couldn't have done much more to get himself on the plane to the Champions Trophy, and somehow he's missed out, which I find very. It saddens me a bit because he's been battling a long time, and he's really on top of his game at the moment and has snatched some victories out of the jaws of defeat, almost quite literally, over that Sri Lankan tour. So I'm sad for him, but it seems that is sort of the way things are going to go. That is the rules in terms of we're going to pick who we think that's best going to win this tournament for us. It's not about who we've contracted. I don't have a problem with that, but yeah, I can see other people having a problem with that. How do you think that New Zealand's handled that?
I feel much the same, really. I think that if they had their time over, they would have done things differently with Trent Bolt. I feel almost certain about that. Again, this is my own opinion. I haven't talked to anyone about that, but yeah.
Can I just say, so with Trent Bolt, I actually think he's probably the only one really out of sort of the people that we've talked about, aside from Kane Williamson on the casual contract. He's probably given back to New Zealand cricket the most out of any of those people. Him going away and sort of playing for those big money contracts in the twilight of his career. I have less problem with that. I think that there's a few people who haven't really yet put their mark on New Zealand cricket and given back to New Zealand cricket yet, who have been given these contracts. Trent Bolt's the one that I'm kind of all right with. It's the other ones that are sort of going away, which I can see causing a little bit of consternation.
Oh, I mean it more from the New Zealand cricket point of view. Totally. I mean, yeah, Trent had every right to go and do what he did, and I think the way he handled it was completely fine, and it seems to have sort of like he's kept going for a lot longer. I think it's I think in hindsight they probably would have looked at what they've done now with Kane and gone, okay, well you're on a casual contract, you can go away and play these tournaments. Maybe they would have sat down and made a plan with him, which is what it appears they've done with Kane. Again, I'm not in those rooms. I don't know, but it appears that they've sat down with Kane and said, here are these windows where we want you to be available. We've got these, important test series. We want you to play test cricket for New Zealand. We've got this Champions Trophy that we want you to be a part of. But every other time, we don't need you for the bilateral ODI series or T20 series. You go and earn your money, and you've put in the yards for New Zealand cricket for so long. And I think if we'd have done that with Trent Bolt, maybe New Zealand would have got a few more tests out of him, and we'd have been able to see him still play in that environment. And yeah, that's a bit of a shame. And I think, long term, it's still evolving because we've seen that threat, I suppose, of all the leagues. What I do like that the PSL has now merged into a pretty similar time frame as the IPL. I'm sure that has impacts on both of those tournaments, but from an international point of view, and certainly for New Zealand, I think that's a great thing, because that's a window where, players who are New Zealand players can, whether they're contracted or not, can now go and play in probably one of those two tournaments. I think we've got maybe nine. I think we've got 9 players now picked up in the PSL. Got about another 7 or something in the IPL. So there's, almost, it's not all the same players, but it's, nearly a 20 contracted list that are still able to go and play in those franchise tournaments. So I think that really helps, because we just don't have. I mean, reality is we just don't have the financial firepower to say, well, we're going to give you what's it called, a non-compete, or whatever it is, that you can't go and play in those tournaments. We've got to be flexible, and I think Scott Weenix even talked about that, when he came into the job, that the contracting side of things has to be flexible, and I like that they have done that now with Conway and Kane, and they've gone, okay, well, we just have to get our best players on the park. It's the question, I suppose, is probably the likes of people like Seifert and Finn Allen, who I think that they probably still have had, depending on where your viewpoint is, more to offer for New Zealand cricket, and at least in the, certainly in the white ball formats, and probably more in the 2020 side of things. Although I did for a long time think Finn Allen had a future at one day level as well, and New Zealand cricket obviously did, with the way that they invested, at least giving him opportunities in ODI cricket right until the sort of build up of that 2023 World Cup. So yeah, where are you at on some of the younger guys? Because I sensed a bit of frustration there from you. Maybe that was me just imagining something, but it sort of feels like you feel like they don't, that they shouldn't be going quite yet.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we are traditionalists, I think, of the game. Test cricket's obviously the pinnacle, but that's not necessarily where the money is at the moment. These guys are trying to make a living, and I'm not going to stand here and say they shouldn't go and make a living or whatever. But if they have decided to sort of go off, then I would feel a little bit more upset. For example, if Will Young had missed out for Finn Allen to come in to the Champions Trophy team, for example, that didn't happen, which is fine. But so those are sort of decisions being made. I'm sort of not going to play for my country at this stage. I'm, for this year at least, going away and playing in those tournaments, which is fine, and that seems to be the understanding all round. It's almost like a official, unofficial kind of thing, unwritten rule of what's going on. So look, I don't have a problem with it. I think that New Zealand cricket has handled it as best as they could. With the Trent Boult situation, he was the first cab off the rank. I don't think they realised they would have so many people then put their hands up to also go and do something similar. So it needed some reworking, and they did it. So I think they did a good job. Yeah. I would like to go back and talk about a couple of batsmen just quickly.
Totally.
Let's leave Rachin and Kane for last. Let's talk about your man Will Young, and how he hasn't managed to get a full-time opening spot. Surely he's done the job. He's averaged 40. He's averaged 40.08 this year through 7 tests versus the likes of Latham averaging 26 and Conway averaging 21. How has Will Young not solidified a spot at the top of the order, Stu?
Well, I think it's because he hasn't got 100 yet, right? And he hasn't sort of turned the big scores. I mean, I think he probably is. Like if you picked a test side tomorrow for a game, I don't know, anywhere in the world, I think Will Young is probably our test opener. But I think the reality is that, as much as it's really frustrating for me, because I think he's got so much. I think he is very well suited to being an international cricketer. I think he's got all the skills. I think he's got the temperament. What frustrates me is it feels like he does the hard work for the team, and sees off the new ball and gets to 40 or 30 or whatever. Sometimes he's been extending those scores in recent times to getting to 70 and all of that kind of stuff. then he doesn't kind of kick on for himself and get that personal milestone of 100. And then, I mean, then I guess it comes back to the team, because once you get 100, if you make it a really big 100, then you go a long way to winning a test or an ODI or something for your side. But I think that's probably the thing holding him back so far. He hasn't been able to turn those, good, solid performances into real massive scores, which is what we saw from someone like Conway at the start. On the other side, as you said, I mentioned at the start, Tom Latham's now our Red Bull captain. I don't know how long that's going to last, because I don't know how his form's going to go. It's been a question for a while. You said it before. We're just not getting hundreds out of these people, not even in white ball cricket. And it's just not happening, and that has to change. And if it doesn't change, then I think there will have to be changes. I suppose the question mark is, who are those people? Because the last tour to India, we saw Mark Chapman was the backup batter. There has been question marks about him recently, about whether he's up to it. But this year, scored a massive 100 for Auckland in first class cricket. Again, I think that was an absolute road from what I saw. But it was a massive double 100, to be honest. But he delivered. He looked awesome I was at the game at Eden Park on Saturday, and he looked awesome, and everyone else looked terrible against Sri Lanka. Everyone looked all at sea. You don't often see a batting lineup where everyone looks all at sea and someone looks completely comfortable, and that's exactly what Mark Chapman did on Saturday. So he's starting to put his hand up. There are young players really young players like Reece Mariu, Mohamed Abbas, Tim Robinson showing some positive signs. BJ Jacobs looks really exciting, obviously in the white ball formats. Scored a 90 yesterday for Auckland. Even Dale Phillips is someone who's putting a decent 12 months, who's put a decent 12 months together, got another 40 odd today in the Super Smash. But that name, that group of names is a very inexperienced group of names, and even unproven kind of at domestic level for an extended period of time. And that's where I look at someone like Glenn Phillips, because and sort of point my arrow towards him in a, if I'm going to be quite harsh. I mean, he's someone he's 28 now. I think he should be in the prime of his career. He played 35 matches since 2024, since January 2024. He's averaging 27 with a high score of 78. And look, when you dig into the context, you see that some of those times he's batting with the tail, needs to accelerate in a white ball game. But I did think he'd be further along in his development. And I know you and Baldy, you've been big advocates of him as someone who's not batting in the right position. And maybe it's around more responsibility. But yeah, I don't know. He is almost one of the biggest question marks in this lineup for me, because I had, 18 months ago, as I said, when I had all this confidence that we were ushering in this new crop of players, he was someone who I thought, might be where not quite where Rachin Ravindra is now, but might be someone who's batting 4 or 5 in our test lineup, who's able to, be a cornerstone of our white ball side and really scoring match-winning innings. And he's become a bit of a bit part player. Is that too harsh?
I think it is. I think it is a bit harsh. I look at his batting numbers. He scored 495 runs last year. But the big number there is that he had 4 not outs. So he's batting 7 at the tail. He turns half of those into 100 or a big score. His average pushes up 40, over 40. I think that he is... He's not being allowed to express himself on the game. I think that, we're quite harsh on him at times when he goes out there and gets out in silly ways. You've got to take those. I mean, obviously he'll go back and think that he shouldn't have gotten out in certain ways that he did, but there are times where he just looks absolutely electric, and he looks a cut above even at international level, and he just hasn't had the chance to go on and score a big 100. He's not going to score 200 batting at 7. It's very, very unlikely. I'm not even sure what the highest score batting 7 is. Probably Gilchrist probably has scored 200 batting 7.
I don't know about 7, but Akram got a big double 100 at 8, maybe. Anyway,
against Zimbabwe.
hey, we've got to go to Zimbabwe soon.
We got it. But yeah, I think that his is more of a question of we need to decide what his role is, and I think it's stunting his ability to express himself on the game. He is a talented player. I remember when he came in that tour of Australia, that fateful tour of Australia in 2019, where he came in. I think he scored a 50 on debut.
Yep.
And look, I thought he was going to be away. And he just never has really managed to cement his role within that team. He seems to be coming in and doing something, and now he's split his responsibilities between batting and bowling as well. I don't know if that's the right way, but yeah, look, I'm a massive Glenn Phillips fan. I think he needs to bat in the top 5, and then we'll see some runs from him personally. Can we move to Rachin now? Let's start talking about let's start giving out some flowers. He's had a massive 12, 14 months, Rachin, hasn't he? Sort of when he announced himself on the big stage at that World Cup, end of 2023. I really liked this year the amount of focus he put on that subcontinent tour. Went there early, had plans for all the bowlers he was going to face. Would have been interesting. It's sad that Afghanistan game didn't go ahead. I think that would have been really good for both teams. But look, he's still young. There is a little bit of chatter around how he's been a bit inconsistent when he's gotten back from the subcontinent. But look, he's still learning how to be a professional cricketer, right? He's definitely a talent that's going to be with us for the next 10, 12, 15 years. I would love to see him opening the batting in all 3 formats for New Zealand cricket going forward. But tell us about Rachin for you in the last year.
Yeah, it's funny, because that after that England series, I think I kept hearing a lot of whispers of frustration around Rachin. Some of my friend groups, they were quite critical of him, and I just couldn't understand it. I mean, as you said, and look, maybe the way that I understood it is that we really, we hold the people that we rate the highest to the highest standards, and I think that, I mean, people were already saying that he's in the next Fab Four. We really, and you and I, other people around New Zealand cricket, I don't know, we've almost assumed that he's going to be a great for New Zealand, and that, like you said, the dedication that he puts in, I think it's a great point that you made around, I'd sort of forgotten in my head that he went there early to sort of do some extra training in different conditions in the subcontinent. And I think probably the frustration around it wasn't necessarily that he had a little run of low scores. It was more that he was getting out and sort of loose, nicking it away from his body. And we're sort of, the ideal batter for New Zealand is Kane Williamson, and Rachin Ravindra, when you compare him to Kane, they're just so different as players. Rachin is a free-flowing kind of player, and ultimately he is going to get out playing. I think of him more as someone like Jaiswal, maybe in different kind of players a little bit, but someone who's going to get nick out, early on at different times, playing a big flashing drive. It's not an excuse, but it's sort of what they do, and most other times they'll hit that ball through the covers for 4 and they'll be away, and suddenly you'll have a super exciting innings. And I do think it's fair to say he's 25 now. Like, in my head, I still think he's super young, and look, 25 is still pretty young. He's got a long career ahead of him if he wants it. But it probably is time that maybe that test average, I think it's 37 or something now. I'd like to see it become 40 plus over the next 12 months, and continue to travel on this trajectory, I suppose. But if you'd have said to Rachin Ravindra, or to me, that Rachin Ravindra at 25 would have started in a World Cup, would have scored a big 100 in India, would have scored runs against Australia, against in all of these different scenarios. Like, he's not just done he's done something in all different kinds of ways, and I think that ability and that experience is going to serve him well. So yeah, I think he's the cornerstone of what we do from a batting point of view because, we don't know how much more we're going to see of Kane. We hope that it's going to be another couple of years for him on the Test arena, that maybe he's going to be playing in some of these ODI big tournaments like the Champions Trophy. But yeah, we don't know what's to come of him. And I think the question around where he bats is an interesting one. I like him at 4 in the Test match lineup. Probably why I like that is because I think the stability. I trust him more than I trust the guys around, and maybe that's a bit unfair to say that I want him at 4 because I'm worried about the people. I'm worried that if he bats at the opening spot and then he gets out and then Kane gets out, what's next? Maybe that's a negative way to look at it, but I sort of do like the stability, at least on paper, that having Kane at 3, Rachin Ravindra at 4 gives that New Zealand Test lineup. And yeah, like you said though, it's been a huge 14 to 18 months for Rachin, and I think he should be super proud and of what he's done. And I don't think he's the kind of player who's going to stand still and go, look back at that and go, oh, great. He's going to be looking at that and going, what's next for me?
And you mentioned Kane there as a good a segue as any to talk about how he's going. I'll let you, give him his flowers. But I'll just say this one thing. I think that we need to protect this man like he's a white rhino. We need to essentially allow him to move away from white ball cricket, which is, I think, what we're seeing a little bit, white ball cricket at the international level, and get a good sort of, if we could get 4 or 5 years out of him in red ball cricket going forward, just to, not only for himself and for New Zealand, but to help all the other batters that are going to come along and help them get out of this funk that they're in. I think that would be incredible if we could get sort of that amount of time out of him. And it's possible. He is fit. He has had a number of injuries which have stopped him, sort of the knee and the elbow, but he seems to be fighting fit at the moment, and he's had an incredible 2024 with 1,000 runs in the calendar year.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the point you made there around his ability or his value to the side just by being there to the other batters, I think is an understated one as well. Because, yeah, I mean, I remember when Rachin scored the double 100, he talked a lot about batting with Kane and how cool it was and how valuable that time just batting with Kane Williamson in the middle was. And yeah, I mean, it would be, I do think you're right that they seem, whether that's driven by Kane, whether that's driven by New Zealand cricket, a combination of both, it does seem like that is what they're looking to, that they're going, okay, well, we'd love to get you through this next World Test Championship cycle. We're very happy for you to go off and play whatever leagues. He's just been picked up in the PSL. He's over in South Africa at the moment in the SAT20. We're very happy. You go, you earn as much money as you want elsewhere. You do your thing. You enjoy yourself. You have some new experiences. Test cricket is what we want you for, and we want that experience to usher in the next generation of New Zealand players. So yeah, I don't have a huge amount more to add on that other than to totally agree, because I mean he's just such a quality player, right? I would love to see him get a couple of personal milestones in terms of like total run. I'd love to see him get to 10,000 runs, because I don't know, we're super biased here over in New Zealand. A lot of people when being compared with the greats of the game, they point to they nitpick various parts of his stats. But I think he deserves to be in that, greats conversation. And, I mean, not the greatest batter in the world who's ever lived, but he deserves to be among those names of top international batters. And getting that milestone of 10,000 test runs, I think would have a significant historical, part in that conversation.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about greats of New Zealand cricket, but his numbers now, he is a great of the game of Test cricket. His 3,300s. That's something that we've never really even touched upon before him and Ross Taylor. And I mean, how many did Martin Crowe have? I don't have that in front of me, but
he didn't play anywhere near the amount of tests. So I think maybe I'm wrong. I think it's only like 4,500 test runs or something. Maybe it's more than that. Anyway, it's not. It's not anywhere near what Kane's got.
He's 730 runs away from 10,000 runs. He definitely should be considered in one of those greats, I think, going forward. Interesting stat. I've just been looking at his numbers. So since 2013, there's only 1 year where he has averaged below 50, and it was 47.
Yeah.
It's incredible, eh? We've talked about batting in New Zealand, batting in England, how different it is to batting around the other parts of the world. That's an incredible average for a New Zealand batsman.
Oh yeah, look, he's been a stunning player, and yeah, we just hope we keep seeing him go forward. If sort of thinking about going forward, I know we've gone for a while here, but maybe we should have a quick look at 2025 in terms of what we've got coming up. We've sort of just completed, a 2-1 win in the ODIs against Sri Lanka. Obviously, that last one was maybe the less said about that, the better. We've got an ODI tri-series coming up against South Africa and Pakistan, followed by the Champions Trophy, where we play India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh in mid-March and early April, probably minus the T20 or possibly minus the IPL and PSL players. We've got 5 T20s and 3 ODIs against Pakistan, although, now again in my head thinking that it's versus Pakistan, probably the PSL players might be available, and then they'll all, share a charter plane over to back to Pakistan for the PSL. But after that, it gets a bit slim for New Zealand in terms of our international calendar. We've got 2 tests against Zimbabwe and sort of penciled in for around July. It sounds like we might get a couple of tests against South Africa while we're over in Africa. And then there's 3 tests lined up against the West Indies at home. I think it was originally only 2, but because of the sort of support for Test cricket here in New Zealand, I think that they've managed to sort of talk to West Indies and say, look, should we have another test, which I think is really cool. What are you sort of looking, what do you want to see out of 2025? Because apart from that Champions Trophy, it is a year where, we don't have a lot on the calendar, and it is and I think it's an opportunity for us to go, what do we actually want? Where do we want this team to be in 12 months' time?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's very possible that we're here in 12 months' time saying very similar things to what we're saying now, because there's not actually that much cricket, definitely from a test perspective, going on next year or this year. What I'd like to see, and this comes again up to that question around what's going to happen with the coaching staff. Where are we going from a ideological, philosophical perspective as sort of a cricketing nation? But I want to see selection is a big one for me. I want to see some idea around who our top 11, top 13 are. At the moment, I think we've got a very, very wide net which we catch from, and we play depending on what tour we're going on or what opposition we're playing. The big one, like a great example that we've got in front of us right now, is the Champions Trophy one with Jacob Duffy. We've got a man who's gone there and gone to the international level and put his stamp on almost every game that he's played in the series sort of leading up to the selection, and couldn't make it in, which sort of baffles me a little bit. Selection's the big one for me. I want to see a little bit of a shift into, this is what our squad looks like, and we're going to persevere with them for the next cycle, whether that's the sort of one-day cycle we're looking to from a World Cup perspective or a Test World Championship perspective. We need to sort of settle on some players and give them roles and give them certainty around they're going to be selected there, and this is the role you're going to play for our team during this cycle. I just don't think we have that at the moment. I think that there is a little bit of movement, a little bit of fickleness in some of the selection policies that are happening. And it's not, this is not aimed at any one person. There's a team that do the selections, but yeah, I think we need to all get on the same page and go towards the same goal. At the moment, I'm not sure we're doing that. What are you looking? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it's interesting to hear you say that, because, and I share some similar. I have some similar thoughts that I can expand on in a minute. But I think it's funny because the criticism of the selection panel has often been that they've stuck with players for too long. So are you more meaning about the roles side of things and sort of figuring out, like, in 12 months' time, who do we want to be in those roles, and then, establishing that now and getting it to and then picking based on where we want to be in 12 months rather than just picking on one game.
So I think that there's two issues in the red ball cricket. There is that issue of probably sticking with a player too long, which I have less of an issue with. The sort of the one I was sort of highlighting is this, for the example with Jacob Duffy, is that I think he should have been there. He's put the performances down at the international level. He's a contracted player. I'm surprised he didn't get a go in the sort of global tournament. That's where I feel like if we were to select a white ball team to go away on a tour, I could not confidently tell you who was going to be in that tournament. And that's a problem for me. Like, I think all good teams have a stable roster, no matter whether that's test cricket or whatever cricket. They've got a stable roster that they're picking from 13, 14 people for their sort of match day 11 and 12th man. I don't feel that way at the moment. And I guess that criticism is more leveled towards the white ball side of it. The red ball side of it is we're getting to the point now where we have given the player that extra game rather than one less of a game. We need to start putting some real pressure on these players, because we've seen that we've seen with the bowlers, for example, when we do give our bowlers a chance, they actually do stand up on the international stage. So who's to say that the batsmen we don't have in the wings won't do the same thing? So yeah, two different sides of that coin. Thanks for calling me out on that.
No, I just think I think it's interesting because it is a fascinating conversation. I think on the Duffy thing, yes, if I was picking that squad, I think I would have picked him ahead of Nathan Smith, and I think they've probably gone with Nathan Smith because he offers more with the bat. Offers probably more in the field as well. Field, he's been quite sharp in the field in his short time in international cricket. But I mean, realistically, they're probably picking the 15th or 14th player in that squad, and maybe that's what sort of edged them across the line. That seems like they've gone. They made a big thing in the press release about pace, like picking Sears, O'Rourke, and Ferguson. So maybe they feel that the pitches in Pakistan, are going to be, they want either all-out pace or they want spin. We'll see how well that plays out. I don't necessarily think we sort of picked the right sides for that T20 World Cup and what we did there. So, yeah, the jury's out on how well that squad performs. But I think your point around the roles and sticking with players, I tend to agree with, but almost in a different way. And I think this year I feel like is because of the lack of cricket, I think it's almost a free swing for New Zealand. And, we've spent so much time. There's been when there's been all the chat around, trying to get this side to be younger, or got all these players on the side, and everyone's over 30, and all this kind of this chatter around. We've had all these big series and big tournaments in the way. Going, well, actually, like we'd quite like to perform well in that. We'd quite like to beat India. We'd quite like to beat Australia at home. We've got England in a test series. We want to perform well. So we're not going to just, go and discard all our players. Whereas I think now, the Zimbabwe test series, or like I said before, the ODIs and T20s against Pakistan after the Champions Trophy, potentially a lot of players are going to be unavailable. Potentially the Champions Trophy is the last time we might see someone like Lockie Ferguson, someone like Kane Williamson, as you said, in the white ball format. Maybe, that white ball tour that Pakistan, when they come here, again, a time to sort of go, okay, well, in 12 months, at the end of this year, what do we want our white ball team? Who do we, let's back our talent identification and say, who do we think can be in these roles? Whether that's saying, Glenn Phillips, we want you to bat 4 in the white ball side because we think you can, do whatever. We think whatever it is, it's to go, let's nail this down and actually, like you said, give that core the next 12 months to play in these white ball bilateral series, in the test game, the tests against Zimbabwe, and, if we play a couple against South Africa, they won't count for the World Test Championship. They'll be, then they're not included. So again, you don't want to just go and lose test series. Tests are important. But I think that they give us an opportunity to go, okay, well, let's think about when we've got test tours to England and Australia coming up. in sort of the following year, sort of the back end of 2026, 2027, who do we want in those roles and in those sides at that point? And it doesn't mean, throwing all the older guys out. I think, as you said before with Kane, it's valuable to bring guys in with those younger, with those older players and usher them into the side in a way like they did with Rachin Ravindra. I think the way that they've actually developed him has been quite good, even though it's been slower than people might have wanted at times. But I think that's the biggest thing that I want to see from 2025 for us to, and maybe we do see that if there's a change of coach, maybe we see a change of, these are the guys that the new coach comes in and has new ideas and says, these are the players that I think we should be going forward with. And really backing themselves and giving that core in those roles. I think your point about roles is really significant to go, okay, let's do this. And I hope we're sitting here this time, at the start of 2026, where we are feeling better about the direction of travel, I suppose, because at the moment we feel like a middling side, and maybe that means we actually have to get worse to get better in terms of the actual results. I don't know. I hope not. I hope that they can continue to sort of stay where they are in terms of results and then start to move in an upward trajectory. So yeah, I don't know. Hopefully that sort of made some sort of sense.
No, it makes sense. I think they've done a B plus or B minus, maybe a B, somewhere in that B category for New Zealand this year. It's interesting. I was looking back at I made a note on all the series that happened, particularly the test ones were the ones I sort of focused on, and I had just had the scores there without the teams that played in it, and had I not known, what the results were, you wouldn't have picked the way that those series had gone. It's there are times throughout this whole year where we have played to our full potential and where we've played well below our potential, and that gap is just too big at the moment. We need to figure out a way to sort of make that smaller. But look, I'm much happier with where we are now than where we were sort of 12, 14 months ago.
Interesting.
Definitely in terms of what our bowling stocks look like. I believe we have the batters who are just currently not putting the numbers up. If they can swing that around, I think that we become a much more consistent side.
Just finally, and again, pure speculation because we have no idea about the coaching staff. If it does change, is there a name out there that you'd love to see sort of, I don't know, either back in the mix for New Zealand or a name that you want to see involved with New Zealand cricket?
It actually really sort of pains me every time I see Daniel Vittori with a Cricket Australia shirt on. If he's doing that role for Cricket Australia, why can't we have him doing a role similar for New Zealand cricket? He doesn't have to do the head coaching stuff, but I think we should be bringing a lot of those very successful around the world players in their day back to come and coach and sort of play a role in the coaching staff for New Zealand cricket. I'd be very interested to know what the setup looks like going forward. Do we have a head coach that goes across all three formats, or do we start to do something a little bit similar and break the coaching roles up into different sort of formats? Would be very interesting as well. But yeah, I would like to see some of those old heads, the Stephen Flemings, the Daniel Vittori's, maybe the Ricky Pontings. Let's get Ricky Ponting over. There's plenty of cricketers out there who are sort of just doing the merry-go-round with the IPL sides or the sort of franchise cricket sides who could add a lot to our team environment, even if they were just with us for a couple of series or whatever it looks like that we've got next year. So yeah, that's what I'd like to see. What about you? Do you have any inkling? Surely you know what's going on with the New Zealand coaching situation.
I have no idea, I'm afraid. I do. I mean, Stephen Fleming. Like, if we could get him involved in some way, I think for all these guys, it's money. Well, no, that maybe that's being harsh to them, but we can't compete financially with those guys, with the likes of pains me to see Brendan McCullum sitting on that balcony for England. I absolutely, to think that these guys that are that could bring a lot to New Zealand cricket are sitting there working for other countries. It's very frustrating. But Stephen Fleming is the one who I do think at some point he's going to go, yeah, go on. I'll I will do this. Maybe that's just completely wishful thinking, and I don't think it will be this time around. But and I actually don't think they will split up the white ball and red ball. I think that they will probably keep it the same, largely because I think that group of players is still quite similar. So it's a similar group to be working with, and England just did it, and now they've gone back to Brendan in much the same way because of, I think because it was becoming too segmented. Maybe that was to do with their calendar as well, but too segmented in terms of, or fragmented in terms of what they, where the different players were. And now you see the Champions Trophy side that they've picked, and it's a lot of those same core of players that Brendan trusts. So, yeah, I don't think they'll do that.
Yeah, the other interesting one is Shane Bond. A very, very old friend of mine said that, sort of Bolt, Southee, Wagner were at the height of their powers when Shane Bond was coaching them. And, some of the insights he gives on the commentary over this summer have been really good to listen to. He really knows what he's doing. And it'll be good to have him in the mix as well.
Totally. And long-time listeners to the pod will know we've had Shane on a couple of times, and to really, really value his input, and even I look at the Thunder side at the moment and think about when we first talked to him. I think some of the players that he mentioned coming through for the Thunder at that time, and now some of them are in that side and performing well. So it's quite interesting having that insight and hearing him. And totally. I think the question is really just how we do it, and there are some good coaches in New Zealand. Glenn Pocknell's someone who's been around the New Zealand, different franchises in New Zealand for a long time, has played an important role, and someone who I do think is held in really high regard.
Peter Fulton.
Yeah, Fulton, and there's also people like Heinrich Milan, who was over here and coaching in CD, coaching in Auckland, and then went to Ireland. So, yeah, there are people around. Jason Gillespie is another name that's been floated around now that kind of the shambles that went on with him around the Pakistan setup. So I think there are names there. I think that the key question is whether Gary Stead wants to put his name into the ring, and how New Zealand cricket feels about that, whether they think it's time for a change or whether they think that the sort of new blood that him and the other selectors are bringing in is going to be a significant enough momentum. But yeah, look, we could, particularly me, I could talk about this stuff for hours and hours and kind of speculate for the future. But it's probably time for us to wrap it up now that we're well past the hour mark. I will say, thanks again to everyone for listening. Anyone who's kind of tuned in over the past 400 episodes, we are hoping to have more of the crew back together again at the weekend for a bit of a roundup of Champions Trophy team news, maybe a chat about the two-tier test proposal, and all of that kind of stuff. We haven't really touched on that, and it's, to be fair, it's gone a little bit quiet again since that first announcement. But and whatever else sort of happens to catch our eye between now and then. But in the meantime, I guess please do remember to like and share and subscribe. Tell your friends about our show. It really does make a big difference for us as we continue to grow. And honestly, we just love chatting to all you guys in the comments. So yeah, tell us where you're at with New Zealand cricket at the moment. But I think that's probably it for tonight. So all the best from us, and we'll see you again next time. Good night.